Another referendum that by a narrow margin changes a nation's destiny. Turkey's president winning 51% of the vote in a referendum that breaks with nearly a century where parliament was the center of power. The opposition, which is contesting the result to give Recep Tayyip Erdogan enhanced executive powers. Despite a crackdown on dissent and a one-sided campaign coverage, it was in the end a tight score. Why was it so close? Once again, it's a result that highlights the divide between big cities that voted no and a countryside that voted yes. So will Turkey be turning its back on Europe? It wasn't so long ago that Erdogan was the leader who embraced globalization, who reached out to minorities, particularly the Kurds, and who was hailed as an example to follow when the Arab Spring erupted. Now, with the nation still under a state of emergency after last July's failed coup attempt and hundreds of thousands either sidelined or in jail, is one-man rule the answer? Today in the France 24 debate, Erdogan wins, but Turkey more divided than ever. With us from Istanbul, Hurriyet Daily News journalist and columnist Barçın Yinanç. Nice to see you again, Barçın. Welcome back to the show. From Ankara, Yunus Paksoy, reporter for Daily Sabah. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
From London, Zia Morel, resident fellow at the Center for Historical Analysis and Conflict Research at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And from Beirut, Jana Jabour, research fellow at the French Political Science Institute Sciences Po and lecturer at Lebanon's St. Joseph's University. Nice to see you.
Hi, Francois.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and on Twitter. The hashtag F24debate. 1.3 million votes. That is the difference. A margin narrow enough to make alleged irregularities very much an issue this Monday. International observers from the Council of Europe say it wasn't a level playing field. They point to the last-minute decision Sunday by Turkey's High Electoral Board to count ballots that had not been stamped by officials. For the president, though, it's full speed ahead. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the day after the vote, who has told international election observers to know their place as he criticized those criticizing him.
We will march towards November 2019 faster and stronger. But we have lots to do. We all know this. Because it was a fight against everyone. The Crusaders' ideology in the West and their lackeys attacked us. But we didn't give up. We stood up as a nation.
Barçın Yinanç, before we talk about the words in which Recep Tayyip Erdogan describes the West, have you been able to crunch the numbers a bit from those official referendum figures? Do they hold up in your eyes?
Well, they do, and they do offer very interesting insight. Actually, one of the most interesting outcome of the referendum, one issue we've been underlining a lot, and you have also underlined during your reportings, was the fact that the big cities have been saying no. And these big cities, especially Ankara and Istanbul, are the usual strongholds of the AKP, which means that there has been some significant defection from the nationalist camp, which is usually sympathetic to President Erdogan.
1.3 million votes, the difference. The accusation by the largest opposition party, the CHP, is that the results should be challenged, that there were irregularities. Do you think that there's going to be a lingering doubt over this result?
Well, for at least half of the society, there will be such a doubt. It's very unfortunate that such a shadow has been overcast, because up until now, despite the fact that the campaign periods have been unequal, uneven, even in the past, not only in this one, but even in the past elections, usually the day of the elections are considered to be highly democratic. Up until now, international international observers have argued that the day of the election, the mechanisms of cross-checks have been rather effective, and it's been very unfortunate for the High Election Board to take an unprecedented decision. The opposition parties will definitely challenge that. However, the High Election Board is the highest authority in terms of the elections. Therefore, there aren't too many, in fact, there are no legal resort that the opposition party can use.
Zia Morale, in your heart of hearts, who won this vote?
I think we have no option but to take the count at its face value at this stage. As Barçın has already mentioned, traditionally the counting system has been seen to be reliable. Now the question in regards to whether what the electoral board has done has altered the outcome of the election is an important one. It's clearly really disturbing that pretty much an hour prior to the end of the votes, they accepted a new batch of votes that beforehand the law basically said that they shouldn't be. But the other question is whether this actually impacted the outcome one way or the other. But the cost of doubt has already, the clouds over the reliability of the count has already been there. And I think for those who voted no, for the next few years, this vote will be seen as unreliable and not reflective of the country's mood.
All right, the president pressing on full steam ahead. He says he's now going to start the legal process to implement the constitutional change, beginning with the High Council of Judges and Prosecutors. Catherine Viet has more on what it all means.
By a slim margin, voters have given the go-ahead to revamp the country's constitution, handing considerably more power to the office of the president. Among the 18 constitutional amendments, the new charter abolishes the post of prime minister and transfers executive power to the president. It allows the president to issue decrees and appoint top officials, including vice presidents. The president can decide whether to impose a state of emergency, though the proposal is then put to Parliament. Parliament will still have the power to enact, modify, and remove legislation. Opponents of the changes say this will only increase President Erdogan's grip on power and further fragment Turkish society.
There's so little trust between the people who oppose Erdogan and Erdogan himself. And we have a highly politicized judicial system now in Turkey as well. So even if the courts rule that there was no irregularities, a lot of people in the country won't believe it.
Erdogan is already looking ahead to holding yet another referendum, this time on whether to reinstate the death penalty. If he goes ahead, it's likely to further strain already tense relations between Turkey and the European Union. For Brussels, it would spell the end of Ankara's bid for EU membership.
All right, we'll talk about the death penalty later, but let me first ask you, Yunus Paksoy, your thoughts. What is going to happen next in real life?
I think it's not as bad as many people speculate, and on social media and also on TV channels. They're talking as if Turkey is steering into a hellish situation, and that is not right. They've been talking about this after every election, I guess, because when Erdogan wins these elections and he has a winning streak, as we know, opposition figures and other circles always speculate that Turkey is going to be more divided than ever. This is the same talk after every single election. So the other half of the population, I must say, that is really tired of these talks, because they are casting their votes. They are this is their will. And other half of the population do not respect that, so it's not really kind to talk about this. Turkey will be much worse than ever. Turkey will be going through a hellish phase. So let's just wait and see what will happen in Turkey. And President Erdogan has been saying that from yesterday that he will start implementing the constitutional changes. And I think after Erdogan, if he wins the elections in 2019, Turkey will be, a lot better after, there's only one man at the top.
All right, but there is consensus, Yunus, on the fact that right now, and you say it yourself, that the country is more polarized than ever. There's that state of emergency still in effect after last July's failed coup attempt. A lot of people who've been fired from their jobs, a lot of people who are in prison. At this point in time, what does the government do about to mend fences with the 49%?
Let me say this, France has been under a state of emergency as well for many months that I can't even remember. And also, Germany was also as much as divided as Turkey when it came to the refugee crisis. Half of the population was behind Merkel and the other half was not. And when we talk about these purges, as you call it, there was a coup attempt in Turkey, a deadly one. More than 250 people died that night. And, the government put the blame on a terrorist organization, so to speak, and they purged the members of this terrorist organization. So actually it does not really break the hearts of many Turks, because they know that this coup attempt was carried out by the Gülenist terrorist organization. So something had to be done about it. And when I talked to people on the streets, they were not really affected by the state of emergency. They were saying that this state of emergency was not affecting their daily lives, and not mine as well.
Right, but how do you rebuild, again, how do you rebuild the trust at this particular point in time between the yes camp and the no camp?
I think the government needs to take a lesson. I agree on that. They need to take a lesson. 51% is actually really low. They were expecting more than 55%, and the people actually sent a strong message to the government and to Erdogan as well. They said, meant some things, and they were not convinced about these constitutional changes as well. They could not really persuade the citizens about these changes. They were not 100% convinced. So it was a strong message, but it wasn't really about these purges, as you call it, or the state of emergency. It was all about, I guess, the deteriorating economic situation and the constitutional changes. They were not quite convinced about it.
Janet Jabbour, you're just back.
I see the reasons for it.
Janet Jabbour, you're just back from Istanbul. What did you see this time around when you were in Turkey? How different is it from previous trips?
Yeah, well, Francois, I was in Ankara, actually. I was following the elections there. And yes, what I saw is a sense that, the country is divided, the country is fractured along ideological lines, along socio-political lines, and along ethnic lines. Along ethnic lines, obviously, between Turks and Kurds. Kurds have massively voted against against the constitutional referendum. A country divided along ideological lines in the sense that today there is a clear cleavage between, on the one hand, the Muslims, the conservatives in the country, and on the other hand, the more liberal, secular fraction of the Turkish society. And also, and this is the most important, we have a cleavage between, on the one hand, an old elite, which is Kemalist, which is liberal, which is pro-Westerner, and on the other hand, a new elite, which has been constantly rising since 2002, since the arrival to power of the Justice and Development Party, a new elite that reaches out to the masses in Turkey, to the conservative masses. And today, the main challenge is to bring up this country together. And the main challenge also is to make sure that this democracy and this new political system does not turn into a mobcracy, does not turn into the rule of the mob or the rule of the masses.
So what is Erdogan going to do, Jana? What's the first move he's going to do? How is he going to handle this transition, as you put it?
I think, well, I was interviewing some people who were in the inner circle of the AKP party yesterday, and they are taking lessons. It seemed to me that they are really drawing lessons from what happened yesterday, from this very narrow margin of the yes vote with which they won the elections. And apparently, they will start making some political gestures, some political opening toward the opposition. I think one good political gesture would be maybe to free the co-chairs of the HTB party, the Kurdish party, who are currently jailed. Also, another idea maybe also to bring all these opposition people, the CHP and the other parties, around a table and just discuss what would be the future of the country, how these amendments would be put in place and implemented.
All right, that's what some of the advisors are saying. Zia Maral, what's the man at the top going to do, though?
It's really complex messaging that has been coming out of Ankara. Right after the election, President Erdogan read from a text which sounded more conciliatory and more calmer. And then now the speech that he just gave was a lot more combative and spoke about bringing back the death penalty. In fact, even told off OSCE observers for the report that they have written, and it belittled the protests that are being currently seen across the country by the no voters. The fact that there is such a small vote margin is, I think, going to fuel his harsher stand. I can't really see any reconciliatory mood, even though the Prime Minister Yildirim yesterday and for the last couple of weeks have been giving that conciliatory message. I think because also the Turkish opposition now is going to focus on what they see to be a serious irregularity in the counting of the votes, so therefore they will not necessarily accept this as a fait accompli and keep pushing that message that the outcome was rigged. And this kind of combination is going to create a lot of political tensions, and clearly the public is divided, clearly social trust has been broken. But of course what happens outside of Turkey towards Turkey is equally important. European Union here is kind of the silent elephant in the room, and how they decide to act on developments in Turkey is going to be really important over the next few weeks.
All right, before we go to the break, Barcin Yinanç, you agree that because the result was narrow, you just heard Zia Maral say, we could see a more defensive and perhaps aggressive Recep Tayyip Erdogan?
Well, in the short term, I do not expect Erdogan to make a U-turn, but it's so difficult for me to foresee how he can continue, because let me make a point here. In the past, in the prime ministerial system, 30% of the votes was enough for him to land as a prime minister. Now, in the future, he needs 50+1% of the votes, and this last referendum has shown that it's a large margin is not a sure thing in the pocket, and the